So we are going to start. So this is the second event of what we call the SEEES seminar series, which is a series of events in which we try to foster discussion about education, in particular not only about science and math education, and society and equity, and how the science and math education relate to the economics of a certain region and the demographics. And this is our second event. We have these four distinguished panelists, and we try to choose something like a movie that we hope will generate debate. And I will do a short introduction for the four panelists, and we will have their presentations, 15 minutes each, and then we'll have a half-hour discussion with the audience. So the first speaker will be Val Meehan. Val Meehan is a professor emeritus of sociology and director of the CREATE Center at UCSD. The CREATE Center coordinates efforts at UCSD to improve the academic preparation of underrepresented students in the community through partnership with K-12 schools. He is member of the National Academy of Education since 1997 and recipient of multiple awards and fellowships. He has authored or co-authored 6 books. His most recent book, Reform as Learning, discusses the cultural and political controversies engendered by the reforms instituted by Alan Bernstein and Tony Alvarado in San Diego from 1998 to 2003. The second speaker will be Tatser Partin. Did I pronounce it correct?
Better than most people.
He's the executive vice president of Price Charities. He's responsible for program operations and grants relative to Price place-based initiative in San Diego City Heights neighborhood. Mr. Parzen has served as general counsel and advisor to the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, and he has worked closely with Los Angeles Unified School District for a number of years to support multiple reform initiatives. Mr. Parzen served as general counsel to the San Diego Unified School District, during which he developed policy and legal approaches to charter school operations and human resources. The third speaker will be Mildred Phillips. Mildred started her career with San Diego Unified in 1980. She was elected by former Superintendent Alan Bernstein to cultivate a partnership between San Diego City Schools Big Picture Company and Mesa College. The result of this initiative was the creation of the San Diego Met High School in 2004, of which she is the principal. It started with 70 students, and now it serves more than 200 students. Mildred is very involved with the San Diego community. She works to support the San Diego Urban League and the Center for Parent Involvement. And our fourth speaker will be Larry Rosenstock. Larry is the CEO and founding principal of High Tech High, a network of innovative and high-achieving charter schools emphasizing student projects, real-world problem solving, and internships with local business and community organizations. Launched 10 years ago as a single school, High Tech High has evolved into an integrated network of 9 schools spanning grades K-12 and a graduate school of education. High Tech High currently has 350 employees, serving more than 3,500 students. So it is an honor for me to welcome all the panelists as well as all of you, and we will start with that.
Thank you, Roberto. And thank you for the opportunity to address this very distinguished audience and also be on the panel with my very distinguished colleagues. I'd like to use this film as an occasion to try to get beyond the recriminations and what I would call a us versus them rhetoric and magical thinking. I guess I'm a university professor, and as I just mentioned a minute ago, I'm used to speaking in 90-minute increments. And so I've been limited to just 15 minutes, and that's a real challenge. So I just thought I'd give the whole story in one slide, right? And the basic idea is that this is the magical thinking part of the presentation. There is no Superman when it comes to reforming education. We used another metaphor, there's not a silver bullet. And so we need to move on from there. And charter schools are not Superman. They're not going to sweep in and solve the problems of American education. So as an overview to the presentation, I want to talk about positives associated with or generated by the movie Waiting for Superman, some of the negatives that go along with that, and then I want to address the final issue, is charter status, so that is to say, are charter schools necessary for school improvement? I think there are significant positives about the movie itself. One is that we're here. A movie of this sort has stimulated conversations around the city of San Diego, certainly on my university campus, and in schools where we work, and so too across the United States. And I think that is a very positive thing, that members of the community can come together and discuss in a very serious way crucial issues about one of the most important institutions in American society, public education. However, I think it needs to be said that a rational conversation about education is very difficult. And this movie, in a sense, can contribute to that toxicity. And part of it is that the broader context in American society is also very toxic politically at the current time. I just put two slides up to indicate examples of those. Over the last couple of days, Marilyn Davenport, who's a deputy chairperson of the Republican Party in in Orange County, circulated the bottom slide of a picture of President Obama in that format to selected members of her constituency, and it went viral, and she's now under great duress and potentially will resign. She's being called to resign. But the point is that not that so much, but the fact of that depiction of the President of the United States in a vilified form. But that's not the first time that that's happened, and not even that metaphor is not the first time it's been used. If you go back to the President Bush era, you can see a similar kind of depiction. Both of those are onerous, both are basically racist, and they contribute to the situation in politics now, where personal denigration and personal attacks and slurs dominate the conversation rather than thoughtful recommendations for improvement. And again, if over the last couple of weeks, if you paid attention to national politics, state of Wisconsin, state of Ohio, both have been involved in vilification of public school teachers as being overly paid, overly rich. I mean, they're earning $51,000 a year on the average. I mean, they're just raking in the money. That kind of a commentary is not helpful and does not contribute to the conversation about school improvement. But I think this kind of an occasion has that potential of doing that, having a thoughtful conversation about education and ways for improvement. Okay. So, some of the positives generated by this movie. If nothing else, this movie demonstrated to me significantly the point that parents, especially parents in low-income neighborhoods, especially parents of color in low-income neighborhoods, have a deep and abiding concern about the education of their children. You cannot leave that movie without recognizing that parents, no matter what their income level, they care about their kids. So that's very positive. And I've personally experienced, professionally experienced, similar situations in southeastern San Diego, where my research center, CREATE, does quite a bit of work. And both of these pictures come from Gompers Preparatory Academy, a partnership school of UC San Diego, where the reason that school converted from a public school to a charter school was because of the motivating factor of the parents in that neighborhood. The parents became a political force and voiced their opinion about being neglected for so many years by the San Diego Unified School District, and then they organized to get the university to be part of it, significant community groups in the community, including the Urban League and churches and the rest, to finally get the attention and recognize that the way that they needed to improve their neighborhood was to convert to a charter school. And once again, I point that out because it demonstrates the commitment of parents to improve their local circumstances. I also want to point out that the movie addresses another issue, and this is, I think, a positive one, and that is the importance of finances for improved public education. Often you hear the expression, oh, public schools are so bad, don't throw money at them. I have not been in any public school where anybody's thrown any money at the school. I'm waiting for that bushel basket of money to be thrown at us. Doesn't happen. Now, to be sure, that the counter argument is, oh, it isn't just the money, it's how you use it, and I agree with that entirely. But one of the things that happens to the schools we work with, the Price School on campus, and I think each of the other schools that are being talked about receive this kind of criticism, but I'll just keep it to our work with Price School on our campus. Oh, Dr. Meehan, we know why you're so successful with students. You spend so much extra money on them. And we do. We spend about $8,000, $9,000 a year per pupil on our students, which is considerably more than the average daily attendance money that comes from the state. Now, a lot of that goes for transportation, almost $1 million. The point is the school year is longer, and if there's an educational plan that is deeper, it does cost more money. And I do not apologize for that. Quite the contrary. I think the point is that if we are going to be a civil society that truly cares about educational equity and educational excellence at the same time, we as a society need to contribute at least that amount to the education of students. So we do not apologize for the fact that we spend more money than the average public school. Part of our model building is to try to encourage the public, which is incredibly difficult because of the dire financial conditions we're in. However, I think that is a challenge, and I think the movie does a good job by calling attention to that, because if you look at the Harlem Children's Zone and the schools associated with it, they too are making a bigger investment in the education of their youth, connecting not just to schools, but to healthcare, job creation, other community groups. And I think that becomes a significant model. Having said that, there are also significant negatives, I think, portrayed in the movie. They're just overly simplistic depictions and some false dichotomies. I call your attention to H.L. Mencken, who said that simple answers are often neat and plausible, but probably wrong. And I think that is a characterization of this movie, at least from my point of view. The topic of the film really is not a discussion of public schools, it's a discussion of the failure of public schools. And the false dichotomies that emerge from that are that we as a public need to make a choice. It's either a charter school or it's a public school. And I don't think that dichotomy really is adequate to deal with the issues that we're dealing with. And it's also significant to me that there wasn't one public school anywhere in the film that is successful that was portrayed. You didn't see pictures of successful public schools. You didn't see discussions with teachers from successful public schools. And on the other hand, the only charter schools that were talked about were wildly successful. Well, I'm sorry. The record on both of those sides is much more complicated. There are a whole wide range of charter schools that have not been able to last through time. They've had financial irregularities. They haven't been able to get the adequate faculty, right? Maybe the academic performance of the student hasn't been improved. So it's a much more complex answer and a much more complex issue than the movie itself portrays. This is a sidelight, it's not a major one, but I was really taken by one of the emotional parts of the movie, and that is the depiction of the lotteries in the schools where that are being portrayed. And you had to feel deeply sorry and emotionally connected to those parents who, as I said, were so committed to their kids. They're doing everything possible to get their kids into a good educational environment. And then they go to these big auditoriums.
and they got to sit through a humiliating experience if they don't get their kids in. I'm sorry, I mean, that's an emotional heart tug, but I don't think lotteries have to go through that kind of a public humiliating effect in order to get the work done. So, but it does, that depiction does call the audience's attention to the dire circumstances that people are involved in, and that becomes one of the issues that people have to deal with. Further simplistic depictions contributing to an us versus them mentality I'd like to call your attention to. Teachers and teachers' unions are being characterized as the enemy. They're being vilified as the cause with everything that's wrong with public education. And at the same time, as I said, charters are being depicted as Superman, as the savior of all. And I'm sorry, as someone who has actively been involved in the creation of charter schools in our community, and as someone who's working with other public schools like Lincoln High School in southeastern San Diego, which is going to be the subject of an NPR special on television tomorrow night, it isn't an either-or situation, and I'm afraid this movie contributes to that situation by pitting teachers and bad teachers as the enemy and charter schools as the public. If you look at the movie aesthetically, there are interesting ways in which the movie producer, who, by the way, is very famous for doing the Al Gore film on climate change, but the two movies are somewhat different from an aesthetic and artistic point of view. But Randy Weingart, the president of the AFT, is shown a few times in the movie, but often in a dark portrait, like the shadows are dark, and she's seen giving speeches shouting, right? Where Jeffrey Kennedy, who is a powerful person, I mean a visionary, I have all the respect in the world for him, he gets to speak from the podium, being interviewed, and the number of minutes devoted to his time versus Weingarten or someone who's defending public schools is much different. And I just think that contributes to that us-them mentality that we have to get beyond. And in addition to what the movie is doing is saying, charter schools are saviors, teachers and unions are bad, and the way we're going to solve that problem is to get rid of bad teachers. Interesting solution to a problem, which again, Mencken points out, I think, is much too simplistic. So I think that the film's recommendations overlook a whole set of alternatives. And part of them are the fact of public law itself, Nation at Risk and No Child Left Behind, have contributed to part of the difficulties in public education because of its, from my point of view, professional point of view, an overwhelming emphasis on standardized testing and assessment, which has had debilitating effects on instruction in classrooms, but also the wildly significant changes in economic conditions in the United States. Our jobs are going offshore. At first they went from the north to the south, then they're going offshore. Globalization is having a tremendous effect on the way in which jobs are being created or not being created. And I think that needs to be taken into account. There's increasingly a gap between the wealthy and the poor in the United States, greater now than at any other time in recorded economic history in the United States. That has a significant contribution to people in neighborhoods like in southeastern San Diego or in the South Bay, where the job prospects are minimal. And not seeing an opportunity as a youth, contributes, unfortunately, to negative possibilities in education. So the role of poverty on students' life is not given enough emphasis in this film from my point of view. One of the things I've studied as a sociologist concerned with education is the negative effects of tracking. And the movie had a wonderful depiction of it. I want to use that in my classes. They had the mechanical track where kids get put on it and they move, like the cars go through and some kids get pushed there and some kids get pushed there. Elegant little formula. However, it didn't point out that tracking has racial and social class composition. Low-income youth, students of color from low-income backgrounds, are more likely to be put into low-track classes, and well-to-do students from white and Asian backgrounds more likely to go into high classes. And that has a debilitating effect on education. So those issues are not dealt with. So I have two more points in 2 minutes. This is going to be a struggle. So what I think one of the things that the film does not do, but we as members of the populace need to take into account is, are there lessons that we can learn from other societies, other countries that have also engaged in public education? And I think there are a couple. If I had much more time, I would go through each of the successful countries, like South Korea and the rest of it. Norway stands out as a country that is wildly successful in international comparison. This is the most recent results from PISA, where Finland, if I said Norway, I didn't mean to. Finland is ranked at the top. The highest score is 600. They're right up there with South Korea. And if you examine the practices in that country, they're not getting rid of bad teachers. What they're doing is encouraging the very best graduates of college to enter the teaching profession. And once they're there, they're given massive amounts of teacher professional development because they recognize that starting over with new teachers over and over again brings freshness, but it might be more expensive, right? And better to encourage long-term investment. So extensive professional development. There is no tracking in Finland. They also don't do any standardized testing. None. They have portfolios, they have exhibitions, they have extensive essays and the rest of their students, but there's nothing like either Race to the Top, or I would say Race to the Bottom, or No Child Left Behind as the testing regimen. And like many of the charter schools that you hear in the local area that have done a good job, the school year is much longer. Our school year averages 180 days, minus 3 or 4 days for professional development, and nobody gets any education around Thanksgiving or Christmas, or certainly not Monday or Friday afternoon, so it really gets down to about 120 days. The European nations that are successful have a much longer school year and pack education into that in a very powerful way. My final point is this. Is charter school status necessary for school improvement? I think that formulation of the issues is the wrong way to talk about it. A charter school, or the expression charters, that's a statement about an organizational form. I think we need to distinguish an organizational form from a set of practices that are to be found in successful schools. And you're going to hear, representatives of two very successful schools. And I think you'll find that you have a set of practices embedded in those schools that I think should be embedded in public schools. I use the University of California expression A through G curriculum as a stand-in for rigorous curriculum. Not watering it down, but keeping it really high and demanding, but providing extra scaffolds and supports if kids are having difficulty. Another feature that seems to really make a difference in successful charter schools is the old-fashioned homeroom. I'm old enough to remember I had a homeroom when I was in high school. They now call it advisory period. But the idea is that a teacher is with kids from 6th grade or 5th grade all the way through high school. Same teacher. They develop a rapport. They develop a personalization. They share information. They get tutoring. They get extra kinds of help over and above the academic. And that's really an important addition that we find in charter schools, that there's no reason they can't be done in public schools. Embedded teacher professional development. What I mean by that is, instead of the traditional model, which is the snake oil salesman comes to the school selling something in a bottle, saying buy it, whether it's going to be direct instruction or cooperative learning or whatever, buy my stuff, and they leave. Or buy this new computer program. I don't care what it is. They come, they give the talk, and then they leave. Successful charter schools embed teacher professional development into the school day, so that people at their workstations are doing the work. And again, that's a feature, a practice that can be embedded in public schools. It requires some political manipulation and requires mucking around with a master calendar, but it can be done. And so the idea of modifying a schedule by the day, by the week, by the year, those contribute to the success of charter schools. My point is, they should be put into a public school because it's not the designation of the organizational form, it's those practices. And finally, instead of an overdependence on standardized tests, I think we were mentioning Ted Sizer before we started, the idea, and Larry's school does this exquisitely well, having kids present their work in an exhibition form. And they're long-time projects. They require thoughtful learning and projection into the future. So my point is that to talk about whether charter schools are the issue is the wrong way to formulate it. Rather, let's pay attention to the practices that make schools successful and then try to implement them across the board. And with that, I will stop.
We're going to run a short clip from Wade versus
Different ways why things are the way they are. But it all becomes about the adults.
We've tried money, passing laws, and the latest reforms.
It's a real good idea when you start to read the figures.
But the one thing those who work in the trenches know is that you can't have a great school without great teachers.
When you see a great teacher, you are seeing a work of art. You're seeing a master, and it is as, I think, unbelievable as seeing a great athlete or seeing a great musician.
Look past all the noise and the debate, and it's easy to see. Nothing will change without them. What happens when a school fails a kid? What happens over time? Now that we know it's possible to give every child a great education, what is our obligation to other people's children? Sometimes I think it's easier to think of the millions of children who are in our schools and look at the numbers and all of the problems, scratch our heads, throw up our hands, and give up, rather than look at just one. And ask ourselves, did we do the right thing? Did we do enough?
So, I've been asked to talk about the politics of public education, which is the hot button, as Bud pointed out, and it's, from Bud's remarks, you can extrapolate how intense the public education debate really is. What Bud put up on the screen and what he talked about, I'll tell you right now, there's a ton of truth in it. And it's a difficult conversation to have. I agree with it. I learn something every time I'm in the room with Bud, and I'm sure you all do too. It's really a treat to be here with three people that I consider local heroes in public education. But there is one thing that I disagree with Bud about it. I still believe in school. And every time I see that clip, it reminds me that government only one that was missing from my lifetime was Kennedy, and I was only 2 years old. So every president since I've been alive, and I've been